of what we do is what we're calling cultivar finishing, or what Government of Canada, in their infinite wisdom, is defining as cultivar finishing, and we're calling that basically things that we are hoping or expecting to be about a generation or less from potential release. So that's all our top tier elite crosses and all the testing and yield trials and whatnot that goes with that. And then the other half of what we do is sort of split up more towards things that we see potentially being a few more generations down the road, and also developing some molecular tools and that sort of thing to help with the breeding program. And then within each of these categories, I'll just add that raspberries is 50% of the program, blueberries is 40%, and strawberries is about 10. So I'll start with the raspberries. The objectives in the raspberries program, basically, we're looking for high yielding varieties, primarily for the processing industry. So they have to be machine harvestable. Pretty much anything coming out of the program has to have some degree of root rot tolerance at this point. We'd really like to have resistance to raspberry bushy dwarf virus, or perhaps something that's really slow to become infected. Aphid resistance is a goal, and resistance to cane diseases. And like I mentioned, about 50% or so of the crosses, raspberry crosses we're doing, are geared specifically towards this. And the whole process takes about 15 years if everything goes really, really well. This is a graphic I put together for something else, but I stuck it in here just to sort of illustrate the timelines that it's taken from the time that a cross was made until a variety was released. And these are raspberry varieties in the Northwest over the last 30 years or so. And you can see most of these, there's a couple that come in under 15 years. Most of them are 15, 16, 18. So if everything goes smoothly, 15 years is a pretty reasonable goal to shoot for. It may or may not happen. And to give you an idea then how this looks in our program, you know, the 2015 we made crosses. We planted seedlings from 2014. We evaluated seedlings and selected seedlings from 2012 and so on down this list. And that gives you about an idea of how many plants we have, or how many genotypes we have in the ground at each of these stages. So we whittle it down, and we put in larger plots of fewer plants, more plants of fewer varieties as time goes on, as we start to knock the list down and take a harder look at stuff. This last year in review, we planted a new machine harvest trial at the Clearbrook substation. We put in about 4,000 new raspberry seedlings. We did 97 crosses on the raspberries. Did not have very many seedlings to evaluate this year, so we only made 12 new selections. And we had 4 different yield trials that we evaluated. We did not do root rot screening in the greenhouse in the spring because we had some issues with our tissue culture, but we're doing that some in the greenhouse right now. And we also have a big project screening through grafting for RBDV resistance and testing some genetic markers for bushy dwarf virus resistance. The 2011 yield trial, you know, this last year was just a really weird year in a lot of ways. And overall, fruit size was down, and I would say yields on our plots were down about 30%. So that's really reflective of what we saw across the industry. That said, this 31412 stood out once again as just being a tremendous yielder. The downside is it's late. It's about a week later than Meeker. And it also does not have root rot tolerance. So it's one of these things that we're going to use as a parent in the program. Machine harvests beautifully, yields really well, but it probably does not have much of a future as anything other than a parent. I'll also point out 72030. Whoop. wrong button. This selection down here, 72030, is a selection that looked good, pretty good in this trial. And I'll have some pictures of that in a little bit. And then we also had Squamish in this trial. Yield was not great on Squamish, but then again, it was not that much different from Saanich or Malahat or Tulameen or Meeker. So it was really kind of in the same ballpark as all of those, which was really terrible in this planting. It was much better last year. So there's a photo of Shemanis machine harvested. And then just a quick overview on Squamish, since it is a relatively new release. It's early ripening. We expect it to largely replace Malahat, although it's not quite as early as Malahat. At our site, typically, it's about 4 or 5 days later. I know some people have said that Malahat's a good week or so earlier, but I think they also have some Malahat that is a little bit stressed from root rot and is pushed even earlier than normal. It has better tolerance to soil-borne diseases than Malahat, which is the big plus. It's I wouldn't say it's anything close to like Cascade Bounty or something like that, but it does hold up better than some things. Yields look okay. It's probably not going to be a spectacular yielder, but it looks like the yields are going to be similar to what we see from the other varieties that are being grown. And it has large, very firm fruit. The fruit are firmer than Malahat. They have really nice flavor. And it has resistance to most of the aphid biotypes that we have in this area. Just again, it was something that was originally identified as having fresh potential, but we see that it actually machine harvests really quite well. And so it's a possibility of something to try for machine pick as well. Our 2012 machine harvested trial, a number of selections that look good in here. Although that's, you know, Meeker, this was actually probably one of the best looking plots of Meeker I've seen at the substation in a long time. Cascade Harvest was near the top of the list for yield. Again, though, everything was down this year, so the yield was not great. I'll point out Rudy, which was the top yielder in this field last year, is way down towards the bottom of the list. There's actually about 70 plots in this field. So there's a lot of things that are not on this list. Rudy was probably in the bottom quarter for yield this year in this field. And WSU 1912, probably in the bottom 10 or 20%. And I forgot to highlight it here. 72030 looked decent in this field as well. Here's a photo of 72030. We're starting to propagate this one to hopefully get a better look at it. It is 1/4 Rubus niveus, which is a species from Asia that has root rot tolerance. And the maternal parent on this actually has very good root rot tolerance. The pollen parent is Cowichan, so it may or may not have inherited root rot tolerance. We'll see what happens. And it may or may not have inherited bushy dwarf resistance either. So it's still early to tell, but it yielded fairly well. It's slightly earlier than Meeker, and it, as you can see from the photo, it machine harvests quite nicely. Our blueberry program, we did a survey a few years ago to identify objectives in the blueberry program, and really what it comes down to is fruit quality and machine harvestability. Things that were identified as sort of next on the list would be resistance to cracking and splitting is also kind of in that tier. So we have some projects in addition to just the normal program, what we're doing to sort of target some of these things. Excuse me. This is some data from a couple years ago with selections that we were looking at in cold storage. You can see this is blue crop at harvest here on the left, and then 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and 5 weeks in cold storage. There's Duke, quite a bit firmer than blue crop. Draper, a little bit firmer yet. And here's one of the selections from our program, 12.635. We are currently propagating this one for trial as well as some others. I think that personally, I think that some things that are in the next push behind this probably look a little bit better in terms of the overall package of the plant. But there is enough interest here to move forward on getting some plants ready, and we're hoping to have plants of some of this and some other selections available for grower trial by next fall. You can see these are selections. It says 2014 selections. Actually, I think this one down here was a 2015 selection. We looked at about 8,500 blueberry seedlings this last year. A lot of those were in this second look. We made 40 selections in that field the year before. We made another 40 selections in that field this year, and looked at some other seedlings for the first time, made a few selections in that field. I mentioned fruit splitting. Splitting tolerance is something that we're looking at in the blueberries, and it's one of these things that it really, if you have a poorly timed rain event, it can really cause a lot of headaches. This was not this last summer, but the summer before, where we had 2 inches of rain in 2 days, the end of July. And it just left a lot of split fruit on the bushes. So we have a student project each summer where we're starting to look at, excuse me, at splitting tendency in blueberries and heritability of that to see if it's something that we can select for. And excuse me. This is last year's data, which basically the slope of the regression line here is our heritability of the trait. And this is a technique breeders use called mid-parent regression, where we're looking at progeny averages compared to what we would expect from how the parents are. And a heritability of 0.62 is moderately high. That tells me that we can make some decent progress through selection with this. The four least splitting ones all had US 645 as a parent, and 8 of the 11 worst splitters all had blue crop as a parent. Strawberries, we still have some June bears in the program that we're evaluating, but we're really making a push to move on day neutrals and gear things over. We're evaluating selections that are already in the pipeline from before, some selections and material from outside of the program, as well as doing a small number of crosses to sort of figure out our system on these. And I think we're making good progress. We're starting to do the crosses early in the season in the greenhouse so we can get seedlings out in the fall and then evaluate those the following season. We do have a selection 1021 that is currently going through virus cleanup. It was reviewed very well from some grower trials that we had in Quebec, where they were really impressed, especially with the fruit quality. It's a very, very firm berry. It's a very sweet berry. We expect the fruit quality, based on our evaluations and what we've been told, people like it better than Albion. We think the yield is going to be roughly equivalent to Albion from what we've seen so far. The one grower trial we had in BC, there was a mix-up on the plants, and they went into a June-bearing field. So a few of these planted in a field with a whole bunch of Puget Reliance. We really couldn't tell anything with that. So hopefully, we expect to have plants back from virus cleanup around the first of the year, and maybe some plants going out to trial next summer. Here's some photos of selections of the day neutral strawberry seedlings this last season. It was just a really, really challenging from the standpoint of there was a lot of really good looking things in that seedling field, and to try to whittle it down, it was a tough task. But you know, when you're going through there, somebody's got to do it, right? It was actually a lot of fun to look at the strawberry seedlings this year because they all looked so nice. A lot of people that we work with and collaborate with in the program, as well as our support people who write the checks up there at the top. And there's my contact info if anybody wants to get a hold of me. I'm not sure, Chris, is there time for a question or two?